Today's best technology, being lithium-ion batteries, has its drawbacks. What we're doing is we're building the best energy storage we possibly can that is non-chemical and is based entirely on mechanical principles. The primary thing we couldn't get away from was wanting to help solve global warming. We knew that was an energy storage problem, not a renewable energy problem. But we put a big circle around that one and said, let's try and focus on that.
Michael Pratt, co-founder and CEO of Qnetic, and Malcolm Mathews, COO of Qnetic, energy storage pioneers.
How much did you raise and how did you actually do it?
But encourage people to invest because they wanted to provide for their grandchildren. That was one way. The other way was also...
How are you going to be different from before the crowdfunding when you didn't probably have as much success with VCs to now?
So one is the product itself. Then we have things like IP, and there's customers. Customers is probably the most important thing that's going to convince VCs that a viable business.
Alex Hormozi, when he sits down and he maps out companies, he says, I would do anything for less than $50,000.
$50,000 an hour.
One of the biggest learnings for me is the people that you would expect to invest are never the ones that invest. It's the people that you don't expect.
How are you going to raise the next million?
Once you get an investor in, what is really valuable is...
Congratulations, Panda Profits gang, we've made some progress. 81% of people that watch the podcast are not subscribed, down from 83%. Our goal is 75%. If you like this channel, please subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests. Thank you. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome, gents. Mike and Malcolm, my first double guest podcast. So welcome, guys. First question, what is Qnetic?
Okay, so Qnetic is solving the world's energy storage problem. Now, that requires a huge amount of energy storage to enable this transition away from fossil fuels and onto renewable energy. So what we're focusing on is that transition, which is about the electric grid. And today we have lithium-ion batteries doing that job. So if you think about how that works, you're basically storing solar energy that you gather in the daytime and then discharging that at nighttime. So without energy storage, you can't have power 24 hours a day. But today's best technology, being lithium-ion batteries, has its drawbacks. What we're doing is we're building the best energy storage we possibly can that is non-chemical and is based entirely on mechanical principles. So it's a mechanical battery.
And what are those issues with those lithium batteries that you've identified and thought, right, now we're going to create this technology in the business?
Well, in the end, everything can be translated into cost. But what it's mainly about is degradation of cells, which we all know about from our mobile phones. After 1 or 2 years, your phone battery starts to gradually die, and eventually it doesn't perform as well, so you have to replace your phone. All lithium batteries have that kind of problem. So there's a degradation problem. But coupled to that, today's grid-scale batteries are only cyclable or only can be charged and discharged once a day. Now that is because if you go more cycles than that, you accelerate their degradation and then you incur a lot more cost. So really this degradation problem can be expressed in a few different ways, but the degradation problem limits the utility of lithium-ion batteries. Now you need to cycle at least twice a day. If you look at the electric grid, you have a relationship between supply and demand, which means that you have the need to charge and discharge twice a day. You would discharge at breakfast time when there's a peak of demand, and you would discharge at dinner time when there's a peak of demand, and then you would charge in the time in between those two. So if you can cycle twice a day, you can handle this 24-hour supply and demand curve, right? Now lithium-ion batteries can't do that. So what our product is doing is solving that problem. It's the kind of superpower of our product is multi-cycling with no degradation.
So with that imagery, can you kind of explain what it looks like and what it actually does as far as a solution? So I've seen the actual prototype.
Yeah.
But yeah, just maybe hands show you on it.
Okay, so a normal battery, it takes in electricity and doesn't actually store electricity. Electricity is not a thing that you can put into a bucket and hold. What it does, it converts the electricity into a chemical reaction, and then you store this electrochemical potential. Now, our battery does something that is kind of parallel to that, but totally different. So we convert the electricity into rotation. So what we have is a motor generator at the top, and that behaves just like any other motor that you can imagine. You put in electricity and it spins. Now that's connected to a thing that we call a rotor. Now a rotor is just a thing that spins on its axes. So we have a very large rotor. It's 5.5 meters tall, 2.5 meters diameter, and it's made from high-strength, lightweight carbon fiber composites. Now, the reason why I make it from that material is because we want to spin that as fast as possible, because the faster it spins, the more energy you're containing in that rotor. Okay, so the electricity is being converted to rotation. We speed the rotor up faster and faster and faster as we're consuming electricity into the system. And when we reach top speed, it's fully charged. Then we can turn off the power, and it will just sit there spinning, and it will keep spinning for about a month. Now, that's because we have a vacuum inside the chamber, so we don't have air losses, and we suspend the rotor on a magnetic cushion, so we don't have mechanical friction losses. So if you can get rid of all of these losses, then it'll hold its charge for a really long time. And then to get the energy back out, you just reverse the process. Momentum that the rotor has drives the motor generator, and this time generates electricity. It's a totally reversible process through that motor generator. So the electricity comes out again. And as electricity comes out, the rotor slows down because it's giving up its energy back to the motor generator. So it's electricity in, electricity out, just like a normal battery. But instead of storing it in electrochemicals, we store it in our rotor that's spinning at supersonic speeds.
It seems really simple to me and probably the audience as well, but why hasn't this been done before? It seems like pretty simple. I don't know, Malcolm, like, why hasn't it just been made?
Well, it has been done before. It's really a technology that has been around for a while, but maybe not made just quite in the same manner. Typical applications for flywheel are for much shorter duration and with more power. We're looking at it completely opposite. And one of the things about hardware technology is once you spend money and go down a certain route, to change that course is going to take a lot more money. And so while there are companies that have attempted that in the past, it would take a significant amount of investment for them to change course.
It's quite an interesting picture of the market today, because you have lots of flywheels that are used for different applications. The high power case, like Malcolm said, they're used for backup power, uninterruptible power supplies in data centers and stuff. So there's like a zoo of those products. There's one product that is long duration and is intended for grid scale use. So that's kind of one customer, also one manufacturer who we might consider as a kind of competitor. But there's no other companies that have a product that is really large scale like our one. Ours is 2,000 kilowatt hours, and that's about 2 orders of magnitude bigger than most flywheel products on the market. So it's kind of like all those guys are making passenger cars and we're making a lorry truck. That's the difference. So the market is, it's quite an interesting situation, and I don't know how long we're going to be the only company with a really large format flywheel, but let's see. Right now we have a first mover advantage.
I think the technology is really interesting, but what I've bought into with the company is you guys, Sally. You're out there, and your origin story is quite interesting. Also, how did you guys actually meet and birth this fantastic company?
Okay, well, Malcolm kind of is perhaps the last piece in this story. So myself and a friend of mine called Loic, we were brought together actually through China's version of Burning Man, which is called Dragon Burn. It's like a music festival type thing. So we were starting to build art projects for this festival. These were geodesic domes with laser art sculptures inside. This brought us together as friends, and we're both engineers, so we enjoyed doing these projects. We found we could work really well together, and we also found that we had a kind of meeting of minds about what the future should look like, and we wanted to participate in making the future better. So after a while of working together on these projects, we said to each other, why don't we start a company and do these kind of things for our jobs, not just for fun? So we made that decision and we founded a company. But from that point, we didn't know what the company was actually going to do. And for months, we discussed this question. Meanwhile, Loic went away on a long cycle trip. So he quit his job and kitted up his bike with bags and a tent and stuff, and then cycled for 3 months across China from Shanghai to Shangri-La. So he went on a kind of, I guess, emotional, spiritual journey of his own, thinking about what's going to happen next in his life and his career. Meanwhile, I was back in Shanghai, setting up the company and doing my own thinking about those things. And then at the end of his journey, I flew. I didn't cycle. I flew to Shangri-La, and I hired a bike, and I cycled over the finishing line with him. And then we took a train journey from there back to Shanghai. We had 12 hours on the train to sit and think about what we were going to do, because this was the moment where the journey was over. It's now time to focus on the company. So we sat down with a bottle of wine on the train and 12 hours, and we did a huge mind map of everything the company could do. And really the primary thing we couldn't get away from was wanting to help solve global warming. So we knew that was an energy storage problem, not a renewable energy problem. So we kind of put a big circle around that one and said, let's try and focus on that. Then back in Shanghai, I was still working for my previous company. Loic had loads of free time because he'd already quit his job earlier, and he started to noodle on different ideas around energy storage. And because of his particular expertise in rotating machinery, that's the type of engineer he is, does rotating machinery, we focused on flywheel storage. And the company was just getting going, and we started to speak to people and just connect with people, discuss, because we know that we don't know how to run a company. We're doing things for the first time. We know our limitations. We thought, let's just talk to people and see what we can learn. And through some random connections, one of those people was Malcolm.
Yeah. I mean, bulk of my career has been working for big companies and setting up operations, etc. Half of that in the US and the other half in China. So happened to be with AmCham at the moment with Sustainability Committee, and happened upon, I guess, Loic at the time. He mentioned Loic and said, there's this crazy French guy wanting to change the world. So it'd be interesting to go have a chat. And that's how we came upon each other.
I remember having a meeting with Malcolm in a coffee shop where we met for the first time. And I was quizzing Malcolm on his whole career and stuff like that, and thinking, oh, this guy's like super experienced, totally different world from me and Loic. We're both engineers and very focused on product. Malcolm's really focused on corporations. How do you build a corporation? How do you run a corporation? How do you do mergers and acquisitions? And we're like, okay, different world to us. But I thought, this is potentially a good relationship. I remember when we said goodbye, I shook Malcolm by the hand and said, you're exactly the person we need to meet right now. And a few months later, we kind of started working together a bit more formally.
What sold it for you with Mike? And what was the thing that had a spark and you thought, there's something in?
Well, I mean, anybody who wants to do a startup, from my experience, and there was one of my jobs was on the other side of the fence. I used to buy small companies as part of my job. So I always thought it was a very admirable thing and challenging one. And it was good to be on the other side. But anybody who wants to start a company and do something so big requires a lot of help along the way. And I thought it was, something that I would like to help on.
So if you were to go back to your previous job, would you consider buying Qnetic?
Would I consider buying
Would you pass your test?
I would think so. I have to say that, yeah. But from a market perspective and the opportunity, yeah. Right, absolutely.
So what do you think was missing maybe in the beginning, but now they've clearly solidified?
Everything in the beginning, missing in the beginning, isn't it? At that point, we just had an idea, I think.
Well, what is it? Like a great company is what, 20% is the idea and the 80% is everything else that you need to do to get it there, to get it successful. And yeah, I think that's what we've been working along the way.
I think at that point, we just had we had a bunch of PowerPoints, some calculations in Excel sheets, and a bunch of sketches. Everything was in principle and built anything at that point. We didn't have any people at that point. It's just myself and Loic noodling away, trying to get things done and having all these conversations. So yeah, it was definitely a bit of a wing and a prayer at that point.
Peace, love, money.
And the big question, the money question, right? Because you've got a really interesting fundraising journey, I'd say. You haven't gone down you started maybe with the conventional route and then realized something else. So
switch around.
Yeah, tell us.
It's a kind of a chicken and egg situation, right? When you're starting a company, if you don't have money, you can't create anything. And if you don't create anything, no one's going to give you any money. And that's what we found out in our initial conversations with traditional venture capital. But quite a few discussions early on. And they were all like, well, show me something. And we didn't have anything to show. And we need to build it first. And that requires money. So somewhere about June of that year, I think it was 2022, we said, okay, we'd come upon this whole crowdfunding scene and how successful it had been, and said, maybe this is something that we can take a shot at. And we started investigating that over the second half of that year.
I think we were a bit dumb at the beginning because we just had our PowerPoints and we were talking to VCs about raising $5 million. Now that Malcolm knows a bit more about fundraising than I, but certainly now I know what I know about VCs. This was hopeless because they want to invest in a company. And at that point, the company was nothing.
Something that was revenue generating.
Not necessarily revenue generating, but you just have some substance. We didn't have any people. We hadn't built anything yet. We hadn't done anything, actually. I think that's the key thing. We felt like we had. We felt like we had developed the idea to a certain point, but really it's all on paper. You need to actually do something. So I think going back, what I would do differently is, so we all put in a little bit of money at the beginning. So with a few thousands of dollars, we could have built something. It might have been tiny, but it would have represented the product that we wanted to make. And it could have had some parts in it that were genuinely operating in the way that we expect our product to operate. Just accept the limitations of doing it cheaply and doing it quickly and doing it at a small scale. And that would have helped a lot. So any founders out there who are just starting their company, just go and build something right at the beginning. Don't speculate on what the perfect product should be or anything like that. Just try and get something built early on because that will teach you a lot more than...
Yeah, it doesn't matter that it does everything that it's supposed to do. It doesn't, that's not a big deal. It's something tangible that people can see and touch. I think that's important.
So it's all bootstrapped.
Pretty much in the beginning. A bit like this podcast, actually. Just start over 2 cameras and just film it. Like, you get to a certain period where it's like, okay, this is clicking now, this is working. And so the crowdfunding, because when I hear the word crowdfunding, I just think of a load of people throwing in money. That's what I think of. But
yeah,
it's more complicated.
it doesn't come with a great reputation, does it?
Yeah.
Normally it's like consumer stuff and
Like the Kickstarter.
some failures that you hear about, like famous failures that people pre-bought a product but never materialized, that kind of thing, right?
So what happened to crowdfunding and why was it so successful?
Well, I mean, we bootstrapped for 1 year, roughly speaking. So we founded in September. It was the following September, after having gone through several conversations with VCs and drawing a blank, that we were like, okay, we don't have enough yet. We need to build a prototype. We need to file some patents. We need to have some substance. And the market was not great at that time for VC. It was still not great. It's pretty bad, actually. The chances of raising money were not as high as they had been in previous years. So we decided in the end to do equity crowdfunding. Now that was a quick decision, but it's actually quite a slow process. It took a few months to get the thing up and running. We put our fundraise online, started to test it with friends and family and see whether it looks good, whether it makes sense, what we're trying to say and so on. And then we launched it formally after some improvements about Christmas 2022. Yeah.
Did anyone have any money then? Were they thinking, oh, I've got to buy presents for the kids? They're not. Was that, do you find timing? And also, which platform?
This is, I think, a WeFunder, although there's lots. And we did spend a bit of time looking at all the different options.
There are many across the world, actually, but the biggest ones, at least the few biggest ones, happen to be in the US. And that's one of the ones we chose, WeFunder. And we had a little bit of predicament, too, because they have strict criteria around it. And, we happen to be in China, not in the US, and we're trying to get money from people in the US. So we had to set up a US entity in that year as well to kind of manage that.
How much did you raise and how did you actually do it? Videos or just literally listing out?
Well, yeah, there's a bit of a...
I think we learned as we went through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. We were novices at the beginning and there's not really a playbook to say, okay, if you're going to do a crowdfunding step by step, you need to do these things. There is some guidance, but really you have to figure it out for yourselves. And your earlier question is absolutely right. You're vying for attention all the time. Once you make it go live, it's like just putting a post-it on the wall. It's not going to get anyone's attention unless you take people over and say, look at this. So we had to learn how to market the company, which we had no idea how to do, really. Particularly for me and Loic, who is, we were taking most of that kind of responsibility at the beginning. We're engineers. We don't really know how to make things sound sexy and gloss things up and make it accessible to the everyday person who doesn't necessarily understand or necessarily care about energy storage or what we're trying to do. So we have to learn that pretty quickly. So the process is you create a fundraising page, put it online. There's a video that goes with it. You've got to try and get all the information in there. Appeal to people's emotions. That's something we didn't get at the beginning. The average investor is an average person. They're not a VC who's going through a bunch of criteria and looking at their calculations and trying to figure out whether it's a good business opportunity. You're talking to normal people who are triggered by your kind of emotional points that you're trying to get across.
Just figure out what the hook is.
Exactly.
Get them in.
Yeah. Make it
all this emotional side.
Part of it was trying to encourage people to invest because they wanted to provide for their grandchildren. They want a better world for their grandchildren, so they want to, well, actually motivated by similar things that we founded the company for in the first place, which is to help that transition away from fossil fuels and to a beautiful, clean planet where all of energy comes from a system that doesn't require us to screw up the planet in the process. So that was one way. The other way was also a kind of anti-lithium ion thread. It's interesting how people don't like batteries. It's weird to not like an inanimate object, but people don't like lithium ion batteries. They don't like the fact that it's chemicals. They don't like the fact that it's not easy to recycle. They also think that it's just doesn't seem logical to them in some way that you can rely on batteries for such a big thing. And another one that was kind of a little undercurrent was that in the US, people don't like the fact that lithium ion batteries are basically a Chinese product, weirdly enough. So you put all these things together and we try and say, well, lithium ion is not the answer. We have the solution and it's totally different. And people quite like that.
So how much did you raise and then what did you actually do with the money?
We raised,
about $1.3 million is what we ended up with. We found out later we could have had more, but
Why?
Well, why couldn't you get more? Well, there were certain requirements around audits, etc., that if we had done it, we could have raised up to $5 million. That's the limit, really, that you're able to raise during a but we got to 1.3. And most of it, the bulk of it, was spent on hiring people to then start building a prototype, which is what would appeal to VCs. So it's setting up, getting an office, hiring those people, and then any of the other, regulatory office related things.
Yeah, that's something that people probably don't realize, that building a company is mostly about people costs. Yeah. We wanted to build a prototype. Okay, so here was the logic. At the beginning, VC said, we're not that excited by investing in your company. Where's your product? Where's your patents? So we said, okay, this is how much it might cost to build a prototype and filing some patents.
Actually, I remember that. I think it was in the beginning, Loic was having a discussion and he was saying, all we need is $250,000 and we can build one.
Yeah.
Right? But that's just purely thinking about
hardware.
Yeah, just the hardware. There's a whole bunch of people you need to build it still. And
I think by rough approximation, the hardware cost is going to be about a third of what the company costs. So all the engineers to spend a year, 6 months at least, designing that thing and then building it, it's 2/3 of the cost, something like that. So yeah, we that gave us the money to build the company such that we could build the prototype that we wanted to build in the first place. So yeah.
And how are you going to raise the next million?
Well, yeah, something important about building a company is, and this also you learned as you go through the process, is once you get an investor in, what is really valuable is an investor who comes in and follows on and wants to reinvest later on, because then they're tied in for the long term. So when you go look for investors in the second round and going onwards, you are looking for venture capital, because typically those are the people that will invest over several rounds. If you go the crowdfunding route again, it's another one shot. You're not going to get the long-term investor. Yes, you will probably raise the money that you need, but you'll have to do something at the end of it for the next round. And it becomes a harder process. So we're looking more for venture capital that are interested in, climate tech, are interested in hanging around for the long term, that have the experience to get us to the next level. Because I think we were able to build it up to this level, but to take it to the next level, you need a substantial amount of help, whether it's people that you hire or expertise that's available both with venture capital and the partners that they have. One of the things we found is a lot of the VCs have partnerships with big corporations that have experiences in manufacturing. And if we are successful and we want to scale, we'll need their help too.
How are you going to be different from before the crowdfunding when you didn't probably have as much success with VCs to now? How's the playbook different?
I think that the kind of catch-all word for that is traction.
Yeah.
So there's several things that you can point at to say, look, we are progressing as a company, and that progression is part of a longer trajectory that you can invest in. So one is the product itself, like how much product development is done and how much is left to go in front of us. Then we have things like IP, which is a way of, I guess, protecting your designs, protecting your advantage in the market. And there's customers. So customers is probably the most important thing that's going to convince VCs that you have a viable business, because you need the product and all the other stuff to convince the customers in the first place. So it has to be a good value proposition and a product that people believe is going to do what you say it's going to do. If that convinces customers, then that kind of shortcuts the question for VCs. I think, if you've got a load of orders, then this is going to work.
It's probably number 4 too, and we learned this along the way. Success begets success, right? So once you get money, that attracts more money, and that's really a difference. We found that in the crowdfunding round too. I mean, as soon as we started getting money in, now people were attracted. Oh, why are they raising so much money? Maybe I should contribute. And it's the same thing on the venture capital side. Once you get one VC in, then now there's interest. There's a FOMO that goes around.
You guys actually thought about pivoting as well, not obviously keeping the business, but you guys are experts with playbook. You actually know the fundraising sense, right? What one doesn't, you could technically replicate this for any industry. Like, what are the key steps to take, whether it be with VCs or crap? By the way, I won't say it's sense, but there must be a way you clearly know the steps because you've been through it, right?
Actually, it's funny you say that, because a guy contacted me at some point and asked to talk to me about what I had learned. And we had a meeting. I ended up chewing his ear off for an hour and a half. You should do this, you should do that, blah, blah, blah. And like telling him all the things that I wish we had done or wish we had known at the beginning. In the end, he's like, yeah, I've got to go.
Yeah, but it sounds like a kind of consultancy. It's like $1,000 an hour.
Yeah,
I will. It's like Alex Amosi, when he sits down and he maps out companies, he says, I would do anything for less than $50,000 an hour.
$50,000 an hour?
$50,000 an hour to sit down with someone. He says, I won't do anything less because I know how to scale business. Acquisition.com. But you guys have done the same thing, right? You've actually, you know what works, and in a particularly very tough industry. And now you've got the tools that could be applied to maybe not $50,000 an hour, but certainly like
yeah, I guess, because you're not the first person to kind of suggest that and say, oh, you're experts at crowdfunding now. But to be honest with you, if we never had to do it again, we'd be quite happy. So don't necessarily want to spend much time.
It's not an easy process.
It took 6 months of our collective lives, working on that thing, refining the story, constantly putting stories out on LinkedIn and on other platforms, and individually contacting everyone you've ever known. And that's a pretty long list, right? If you go back to when you were a student or something like that, and you get all the emails that you can find, and you're then saying, well, who do I contact next? And it's Uncle so-and-so I haven't spoken to for several years. Doing all that stuff, it's kind of exhausting.
That's a significant question, actually. How did you approach those guys? Was that, hi, how are you? Why do I have a business? It was like, hey, how are you? How you been? How's the kids? What you been up to? Like, was there a series of conversations before the funding question came? So I know it's a tough, for anyone selling a business or a service. When do you approach about business? Do you go straight in with, hi, how are you? By the way, I'm working on this. Or do you have a more, hey, I see you've been doing some cool stuff, then go in with the business?
See, that's one of the hard parts. And we talked about it as we were figuring out the strategy, because it's not a form letter. There's no way you can go to all of them and have the same single approach. And so each one we know, there's some history, obviously, why you know that person and what your history is with them. And then you have to tailor the approach according to that history. So it was a very time-taking process. It's not something you could sit and do it quickly in one day. So each of us, when we reached out, whether it's family or friends or colleagues or past, whoever we met in the past, it was a very differentiated approach, if you will.
I think the key to that is don't don't be shy. Don't try and hide what you're communicating for, because people will detect that and they'll actually puts them on the back foot. So I remember writing emails and just coming on saying, oh, hi, look, I know I haven't spoken for ages, but I'm going through all the contacts I know and trying to get everyone to understand this thing I'm working on, and describe all the thing, and then just say, look, actually, I'm really happy this gave us a chance to reconnect. And it's true. It's not like you're being phony. Whereas if you start by kind of asking, oh, I haven't spoken for ages, how are you doing? And kind of hiding the fact that you're actually talking about something else, then that is a bit phony. So just be frank and open about it, and just be in a good mood when you write the email, and that will come across. So people won't be upset to receive it. And if they want to ignore it, of course they can.
Yeah, and that eliminates the, hey, I haven't heard from you in 10 years, why you approach me about
Yeah, just be honest about it. Yeah, exactly.
One of the biggest learnings for me is the people that you would expect to invest are never the ones that invest.
Yeah.
It's the people that you don't expect.
What do you mean by that?
It's you would say, oh, I'm really close to this person, I know this person really well, or whatever. They are surely going to invest. They have the money. It's not. It's people that you don't expect that really come up with big amounts of money. It's strange how it worked out.
Obscure high school friend that maybe you sat next to in a class, and now that
or people you don't know, or they're fascinated about what you're doing.
I remember we wrote some lists about people we thought would definitely invest. We thought, okay, we'll craft an email to these guys and should be good. It might be big numbers, and often materialized to nothing. People that maybe in our previous jobs we've been loyal to for 15 years, and we thought, well, they'll just invest out of moral support, not because they think it's going to make money, but they're like, okay, we wish you well. Here's a few $100s, but
because the minimum investment was $100.
I think it's $200
or $200. Yeah, that's not much. You should be right. But you'd be surprised how many people don't.
So you guys had a demo day recently, which I think is really, firstly, amazing, but it's a significant point on putting your product out there, right? A lot of people are scared to, I don't want to put this thing that I've invented out on the market already because someone might just go ahead and copy it. So how were you able to successfully capitalize on that demo day, and what's been the effect afterwards as far as investment and VCs?
Well, we've been planning to do that demo day ever since we started raising the money. So we raised the 1.3 million about now, 12 months ago. So since then, we've been spending that money on designing that prototype and building it. So yeah, demo day came around about a few weeks ago. So we're actually quite excited to do that. We've got 850 investors who invested in the WeFunder thing, who are expecting to see some kind of results. So that's one reason for putting it out there in the world. Well, actually, our company, ever since we went on WeFunder, we've been out there in the world saying, this is what we're going to do. This is what it looks like. These are the performance specs and so on. So there's been some version of our product that's been online somewhere for all that time. And we're now raising money again. So we wanted to show the world that this thing works and use that as a catalyst to re-energize conversations with VCs to get them to invest now in the next stage of the company. So, the way that fundraising works and companies works is you have to do things in kind of milestones, stages of the company. So you raise some money, and with that money, you're going to get to the next stage. And that stage needs to have some value generated. Now, that might be that for example, you might have built out a factory and started production. So you've gone from a prototype stage to a production-ready stage. So that would signify a reason why somebody would invest, because it's going to bring this value at the end that you can.
And I want to reiterate that point that Mike made earlier about a company, once you get invested in, is owned by those investors. So we owe it to them to explain that we have used this money wisely. And so that demo day is really a demonstration of that, right? We have an actual product. We haven't been just taking your money and traveling the world or doing something stupid. So
yeah,
it's an important part.
Proof that we're progressing to the next stage of the company.
Yeah.
So on the point about like secrecy of the design, you can only see the outside. So we're not taking it to pieces and showing people what's inside the bearings or even what the rotor looks like inside. So there is some level of secrecy there still. You can't really reverse engineer it by looking at it. So we're comfortable to show that to the world. It's beneficial for us to, in a way, kind of make ourselves a little bit famous in small circles.
And as far as the company itself, born in China, or selling to the West. So how does that work? All right, that's what I'm trying to get my head around that. Although actually what I'm doing, the podcast, so I'm already too many Westerns. So what has been the strategy behind that? We're both short term and long term.
I think the foundational comment behind that is that we're trying to solve global warming. So for us to fulfill our mission as a company, we can't have a product that just exists regionally. It needs to be a product that is successful globally. So really that's the kind of answer to your question is driven by wanting to have a globally successful product that has maximum impact on moving the needle. So how do we make a global product? We need a global organization that's manufacturing in the US, manufacturing in Europe, manufacturing in Asia. Those 2 places, you can probably cover most of the world. So being born in China is good and bad in some ways, right? So China is the biggest market for energy storage. So being here now is strategically beneficial. We are talking to investors, we are talking to potential manufacturers and potential customers in China for taking our product in the future. But if we want to make sure we can also sell a product in the US and Europe, there's a danger that if we launch in China first, we may never get to the US. So we're going to do that a little bit in reverse. We're going to start in the US. Our first market will be the US, first manufacturing will be the US. And then once we have kind of stable product, then we'll launch it in China and Europe. I'm not sure which one will go next. That's the approach. Now, the issues with China are really around, we're worried that we may have a relatively small and short-lived company if we launch first in China. We are concerned about losing our technology, our IP leaking if we start manufacturing in China. And the second thing is that if we launch a product in China, then it becomes kind of a Chinese product, particularly if all the team are here. And then trying to sell that into the US may be a challenge because we can't really ignore the geopolitics around the world, and particularly in something that's critical like energy.
Could you do both? Could you have a product that's actually more, because your product is universal, right? It can be used pretty much in, but could you make something that is a bit more localized, if that's the right word, for the Chinese market, and something more for Western? Is that potential?
It will be a bit like that anyway, because the energy grids are different all around the world. The voltage is different. The frequencies are different. So there will be a localized product, whatever. But the strategy is that we manufacture. So that, at the beginning I mentioned the rotor. That's really the core of the product, and that is almost 2/3 of the value of the manufactured goods. So we'll manufacture a US rotor for the US and a European rotor for Europe and a Chinese rotor for China, and then assemble the rest of the product around that and sell it in the local market. So yeah, it will be localized in terms of manufacturing.
Gents, I've learned so much today. For a layman like me that didn't really study enough science when I was in high school, to be honest, I was into the arts, but thank you so much. And if people want to find out more about you guys, what you're up to, whether it be finding more out about the product or the company, VCs as well, where can they get in touch?
I think the best answer would be to go to LinkedIn, and you can find us by searching for Qnetic, which is Qnetic. Or you can see our website, which is qnetic.energy.
And what's the name of the playbook company that we're going to create? Oh. No, I'm joking, of course.
We funded you.
You guys have really, I think we've got a fantastic solution, but it's also, we've actually created a funding company.
Yeah, without realizing it. Yeah. Actually, from time to time we joke that if the company fails, what's the plan B for the company? So far, it's been a like a Negroni bar, but maybe it's the WeFunder fundraising consultancy instead.
Well, the playbook idea, I think, for companies, that is a big seller. Going into a restaurant and saying, look, you need to work out your process. But if it was for crowdfunding, funding the VCs, that is what every company wants. Like in China, in the last 10 years, the amount of people I've had come up to me and say, hey, I'm looking for investment, which is the worst way to invest a company, right? As you know, if they'd actually sat down with me, we'd had a chat, and probably that initial coffee that you guys had, you can see how that has a lot more power. There's so many guys and girls running around China right now just getting trying to get investment, but they're not using the methods that you use, the solution. They just randomly go into space. Say, I need investment.
Yeah.
LinkedIn messages. And it seemed like you guys went through ups and downs, but clearly you've got a solution now that is going to carry you forward. And I know you're going to be raising millions of dollars. I'm just a bit annoyed that I can't get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, check out Qnetic. And if I missed any questions, feel free to drop a question in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.